In the mid-1990s, Scott Weiland and his band Stone Temple Pilots would rise to rock and roll stardom. However, Scott's personal issues would ultimately get in the way of his potential, and ultimately result in his tragic demise.
Scott Weiland, one of rock's most distinctive voices, has died.
Shannon was found dead in the band's tour bus in New Orleans on Saturday afternoon.
Mark Lanigan has died at the age of 57.
Andrew Wood was pronounced dead from complications resulting from a drug overdose.
Lane Staley was found dead in his Seattle home on Friday.
Two conflicting stories of how frontman Scott Weiland and bassist Robert DeLeo met have been related by the band. One was that they met at the Black Flag concert in Long Beach, California in 1985. They began discussing their girlfriends, only to realize they were dating the same woman. Instead of letting this come between them, they developed a bond and formed a band after they each subsequently broke up with a girl. Weiland presented a different version in his autobiography, saying that he and his friends in their band Side to Side, guitarist Corey Hiscock and drummer David Allen pursued Robert after witnessing him play at various live performances. Regardless, Weiland, DeLeo, Hiscock, and Allen would eventually form a band called Swing. Allen left after a few years. The remaining members saw drummer Eric Kratz play in a Long Beach club and convinced him to join them. Guitarist Hiscock eventually left the band in 1989. In need of a replacement and auditioning many guitarists, Robert suggested his older brother Dean. At the time, Dean was a successful businessman who had left behind his previous musical career but still played guitar as a hobby. The band managed to convince Dean to play for Swing, completing the original STP lineup. Dean reportedly refused to continue playing in a band called Swing, and shortly afterwards the band became Mighty Joe Young. They recorded the demo tape around 1990. The Mighty Joe Young demo features tracks that would go on to be re-recorded for the band's first studio album, as well as some musical styles that would not be featured on any of STP's studio music albums, such as funk and yodeling. Mighty Joe Young played several gigs in the San Diego area, building up a fan base. Their first show was supporting Henry Rollins at the Whiskey A Go-Go. The group then began to work on their debut album with Brendan O'Brien. During the recording, they received a call from their lawyer, who informed them that there was a bluesman who had already claimed the name Mighty Joe Young. Inspired by the STP motor oil stickers that the band members were fans of in their youth, various ideas on the initials STP were shared by the band before they settled on the name Stone Temple Pilots. By the early 90s, the music industry decided that San Diego was the next Seattle, and record labels dispatched legions of silver-tongued A&R people with fat checkbooks in the hope of signing the next Pearl Jam or Nirvana. Stone Temple Pilots developed a fan base in San Diego clubs, and in 1992 signed with Atlantic Records. Their first album, Core, was released on September 29, 1992, and peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Albums chart. Core was a big success, producing hits Sex Type Thing, Plush, Creep, and Wicked Garden. While the album was a major commercial success, some in the music press criticized the band as a grunge imitator. That same year, Scott Weiland and Dean DeLeo played an acoustic version of Plush on the MTV show Headbangers Ball. This is considered one of Weiland's greatest vocal performances. Today's video is sponsored by Dubby. Dubby is an energy drink to help enhance focus, concentration, and reaction time with no jitters, crash, or bad ingredients. Dubby is also sugar and calorie free. If you use the code RockRealmm at checkout, you'll save 10%. The link to Dubby Energy is below. Despite negative reviews from some critics, Stone Temple Pilots continued to gain fans and toured, opening for bands such as Rage Against the Machine and Megadeth. 1993 brought continued success on the road, with the band headlining a 2.5-month American tour. As with many extroverts, Scott Weiland's icy cool bravado masked an army of insecurities. Haunted by anxiety and depression as a child, Weiland also suffered from bipolar disorder that remained undiagnosed until he was 34. But the first signs of his addiction developed before he was even old enough to drive. In the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the volume that describes both the nature of alcoholism and AA's 12-step program of recovery, a chapter titled The Doctor's Opinion outlines the disease concept of alcoholism. a two-symptom condition characterized by both a physical craving for alcohol and a mental obsession. Even when sober, the alcoholic is obsessed with the next drink. As early as high school, Weiland exhibited both symptoms. We'd get fucked up on Friday and Saturday, and then we'd make it all the way till next Friday before doing it again, Weiland told Esquire magazine in 2005. But as time went on, it became a fixation, an obsession. All you could think about the whole week was getting to Friday again so you could party. That was all I ever thought about. Still living at home, Weiland's heroic bouts of binge drinking soon paved the way for cocaine and weed. After finding little white bundles of blow in his bedroom, his parents packed him off to his first rehab. He was 16. In the ensuing years, Weiland continued to self-medicate with alcohol, coke, and weed, finding only fleeting comfort from a corrosive sense of self-loathing. When Stone Temple Pilots signed with Atlantic Records, this gave Weiland broad exposure to an addict's two biggest enemies, money and access to drugs. On the last stop of an STP co-headlining tour with the Butthole Surfers in 1993, in a backroom of New York City's Royalton Hotel, Weiland first tried heroin. And in the warm embrace of the black tar, his demons finally retreated. When I tried heroin for the first time, Weiland recalled in 1998, it seemed to make all the insecurities just go away. I suddenly felt, wow, this is how normal people feel on a day-to-day basis. Within a year, he was spending an upwards of $3,000 a week on heroin. It goes without saying that if drugs didn't work, people wouldn't take them. And initially, Weiland found that heroin not only removed his anxiety, but also fed into his carefully cultivated, elegantly wasted rockstar persona, and inspired a bracing new experimentalism. He attributed much of his creativity during the sessions for Stone Temple Pilots' second album Purple to smack. Heroin gave me this ability to distance myself from the creative process, and thereby gave me the strength and courage to try new things, Weiland told Classic Rock. Part of me felt that I couldn't be creative unless I was high. At the age of 24, the singer graduated from smoking heroin to injecting the drug. He spoke about his first intravenous shot. It's like what they talk about in Buddhism, that feeling of reaching enlightenment, he told Esquire. They say there's a golden glow that goes from your fingers all the way through every appendage and into the pit of your stomach. That's what it felt like to me, like I'd reached enlightenment, like a drop of water rejoining the ocean. It didn't take long for Weiland to lose what little control of his habit remained. In 1995, 2 days out of another rehab, police busted him for possession of heroin and cocaine. After his wife bailed him out, he fled her car at a stoplight and disappeared for days while shooting dope with Courtney Love. Stone Temple Pilots scrapped a 1996 tour, claiming that their singer had become unable to rehearse or appear for these shows due to his dependency on drugs. With STP forced into hiatus, Weiland channeled his experiences into his first solo record, 12 Bar Blues, an unsparing examination of his addiction. But things were getting worse. In 1998, police arrested Weiland, copping dope in a New York housing project. A drug-related probation violation landed them 5 months in jail. Years later would bring more arrests for drunk driving, battery, and possession.
Hello. Everything I do is wonderful. I can't do no wrong. Oh. Hi, Kurt. I'm Scott Weiland. I sing for a band sometimes called STP. We're a rock and roll band, not necessarily alternative enough. I also have made my first solo album and a video called Barbarella. Maybe we can do an interview together sometime. You know, I'll dye my hair blonde and wear lots of jewelry. You're doing your job, I'm doing mine. Let's be friends. Can't we all just get along?
For anyone who's never struggled with drugs, it may seem baffling that someone with Weiland's money and resources would repeatedly relapse, but addiction specialists would counter that the first time he injected heroin, he lost ability to choose. Unless he found something that gave him the same ease and comfort as drugs, relapse and death were inevitable. For Scott Weiland, drugs weren't his problem, but his solution. Take away that solution, and you've got an emotionally ravaged man, tormented by untreated mental illness, whose every misstep is trotted into our headlines for ridicule, judgment, and scorn. For a few dollars and a needle, he could make it all go away. Weiland himself admitted that the reason behind his chronic relapsing was simple. "I never wanted to quit," he told Esquire. "I saw narcotics as something I needed in order to function. I believed I was born with this particular chemical deficiency that only opioids could fulfill. My basic thought was, how can all of you people want to keep me away from the one medicine that's keeping me from taking my head off?" Weiland spoke about one of his arrests for possession of heroin, saying, "This one night, no one was around. I went and knocked on the door, and no one was in the room. I went back to my car, which I had been careful to park down the street, and you never want to drive right into the spot where you're gonna cop. And I got into the car, and before I could even decide what to do next, the cops just kind of swooped down on me. They came from nowhere, a bunch of them. I didn't think that I had any dope in my car. That's the mistake a lot of dope fiends make. You get sloppy, and you get lazy. The cops asked me if I had anything on me, and I said nope, and I really thought I was telling the truth. But then they checked my car, and I did. It was inside the ashtray. I swear I didn't know it was there. That's the thing about being a dope fiend with money. You don't count your crumbs, you leave it littered all over the place. You can be rich enough to really fuck yourself up. I know where it comes from. It comes from my parents divorcing, abandonment and all that. And it also just comes from a lot of guilt and shame. And I guess feeling that you caused that feeling yourself becomes its own self-perpetuating thing, and it takes on a life of its own."
The Stone Temple Pilots were flying high as one of the top grunge bands on the circuit. It's been 2 years since they released an album, but frontman Scott Weiland continues to make headlines, but not for his music. The latest incident happened when Burbank, California police arrested the singer and booked him on drug charges. Ironically, it happened after a routine traffic stop in this industrial section of town. The driver, a 27-year-old woman. Police say the 35-year-old Weiland was in the passenger seat of his own car, a luxury BMW.
During the traffic stop, the officers were looking inside the car like you normally do with your flashlights, what have you, and they observed a hypodermic syringe on the floorboard of the car.
Police also discovered what they believe is heroin. Both the woman and Weiland were taken into custody. Now, this isn't the first time Weiland has seen a jail cell. A few years ago, he was also busted on drug charges and did some time for failing to complete a drug rehab program.
Despite reports that the band had begun to work on a 6th studio album in 2002, the band went quiet by the end of the year. After reports of an altercation between Dean DeLeo and Weiland after the last show of Stone Temple Pilots' fall 2002 tour. As a capstone to the band's career, Atlantic Records released a greatest hits album, Thank You, with a bonus DVD of archive material and music videos. In 2003, 5 days after Thank You was released, the DeLeo brothers revealed in an interview with Guitar One that the band was officially done. In 2003, Weiland was given another chance, as he joined newly formed supergroup Velvet Revolver. Reality came screaming back because I started asking for it, and God helped a little bit in the form of a black and white police car. I dropped the scum I was bottom feeding with, and decided to join a band with guys whose new lives I admired, and I decided to man up. It was the hardest thing I ever did. Easy to stop killing myself, but trying to find out who I am in order to find my wife and kids again. Well, that was like walking through a maze blindfolded. Every time I felt I was getting close to them, I would suddenly get hit in the gut with a bat. This was taken from an interview with Weiland after admitting that he had cleaned up and gotten sober. Weiland found success with a new band and was all good for a period. Unfortunately, in 2007, Weiland's younger brother Michael died of cardioempathy. When Scott got the call, the first thing he did was chug a glass of whiskey. Before long, he was smoking cocaine. Scott loved his brother. It was a huge devastation, says Michael's widow. I don't think Scott ever fully recovered. The Velvet Revolver songs For a Brother and Pills, Demons, and etc. from the album Libtard are about Michael. Weiland said in an interview with MTV News in November 2008 that several songs on Happy were inspired by the death of his brother and his separation from Mary Forsberg. In the same article, MTV News reported that Weiland had not done heroin since December 5th, 2002. Weiland also admitted that he went through a very short binge with coke in late 2007. Weiland claimed he was sober, but had numerous relapses along the way. Weiland claimed that his children were a large factor in cleaning up. My family is the most beautiful thing in my life, beyond anything else, even music, but it took loving them before I could love myself. The great thing about kids is immediate gratification. As soon as I get home from touring, my wife and kids become my life. There is nothing sweeter. I get up with my kids every morning, I get them breakfast right away, and then I step outside to have my coffee and my cigarette. Because I really am not good at talking to anybody until I've had a cup of coffee and a couple of cigarettes. But as soon as I've done that, I'm like, alright, let's go. What do you want to do today, kids? Weiland subsequently left Velvet Revolver in April 2008, and the following month, Stone Temple Pilots announced they were reuniting for a 65-date North American tour. The group officially reunited for a private gig at the Houdini Mansion, and held their first public show on Jimmy Kimmel Live on May 1st. Stone Temple Pilots toured throughout the summer and fall, headlining the Virgin Mobile Festival in Baltimore in August of that year, as well as the 10th annual Voodoo Experience in New Orleans. The band began to experience problems, and suspicions were raised that tensions within the band had arisen once again. Despite the band's claims that their fall tour would be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Core, this did not happen. According to Weiland's bandmates, they did not want to do the celebration because they believed he no longer had the vocal range to perform some of the album's songs. Weiland then decided to perform the louder songs they did not want to play on a separate solo tour. The rest of the band decided to hide their anger and frustration towards the decision, causing Weiland to assume that they were all on the same page. On September 17th, at a show in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Stone Temple Pilots arrived nearly 2 hours late and cut their set 30 minutes short, angering many fans. The following day, the band released a brief statement announcing that night's show in Lethbridge, Alberta was cancelled due to Weiland being ordered to go on a 48 hours complete vocal rest due to strained vocal cords. Scott admitted that same year to have relapsed on alcohol. Howard Stern, who interviewed him during that period, stated, "He was so open and honest even about drug use. I knew that he was addicted, and I didn't know how severely. I just wanted to hug the guy and say, 'You're such a talent. You're so beautiful. Just stay away from these drugs. Please get a handle on it. It's an illness, and he didn't have a handle on it. It just saddens me.'" To the shock of everyone, on February 27, 2013, Stone Temple Pilots fired Weiland. The firing was officially announced as Weiland left on tour with his solo band. Dean DeLeo said, "It was a very difficult decision to terminate the face of your band. There are many paths to the history of certain bands, and each one is a little different, but it all kind of turns out the same in the end. But it was a very difficult decision to do that. That's as big as it gets, but we didn't really have any other choice." Stone Temple Pilots officially replaced Weiland with Linkin Park frontman Chester Bennington. An obviously hurt Weiland criticized the band after they hired Bennington as a replacement, claiming he was still a member and they shouldn't be calling themselves Stone Temple Pilots without him. A month later, Scott Weiland and the Wildabouts' Purple at the Core tour commenced in March 2013 with pop rock band Migs as the opening act. In an interview with San Diego radio station KBZT in June 2014, Weiland stated that his debut album with the Wildabouts, titled Blaster, would be released in November that year. However, it was pushed back and eventually released on March 31st, 2015. Guitarist Jeremy Brown and one of Scott's closest friends died the day before the album's release. The cause of death was determined to be multiple drug intoxication, his severe drug use being significant contributing factors. Nick Mayberry replaced Brown in April 2015. In that same month, footage from a show raised questions about the health of Weiland, who appeared to be zoned out and giving a bizarre performance. A representative for Weiland asserted that lack of sleep, several drinks, and a faulty earpiece were to blame, not drugs. In June 2015, Weiland claimed that he had been off drugs for 13 years. His response was directed towards comments made by Filter's frontman, Richard Patrick, who claimed Weiland was using drugs and that his fans were pushing him closer to death by sticking up for him. With Weiland being formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder, his mental health issues would come to light numerous times in the following years. After the death of Brown, Weiland was experiencing episodes of paranoia and mania caused by his bipolar disorder. After a March show at Boston's Brighton Music Hall, Weiland hosted a disastrous VIP meet and greet session, heckling one fan with "Let's suck a," and insulting others who had paid $150 for the interaction. Some girl hit on Scott, and he goes, "You know what? You can go fuck yourself." Weiland later apologized publicly on Facebook for acting like a total asshole. Scott's wife, Jamie Wachtel, claimed she had confronted Weiland's bipolar episodes after they had first become inseparable in December 2011. He would be on the couch with a drink, smoking and watching whatever mindless television, she remembers. "I started to see he had paranoia, and some of the bipolar stuff started to come out. He kept his curtains closed all the time. At one point it was so bad I had to move out because he was unstable. They found one medication that worked, but Weiland gained 40 pounds, so he stopped taking it. Eventually they found a medication that leveled him out. For the last couple of years, he was doing pretty great. Then on the Wildabouts 2015 spring tour, Weiland's behavior became scarily unrecognizable. In April, a video of Weiland failing at a painfully styled off-key rendition of Stone Temple Pilots' mainstream rock tracks chart #1 single Vaseline went viral. The suspicion, one of music's most notorious junkies, was back on smack, but it turned out that his prescribed dosage of the antipsychotic drug Geodin was too high. "I thought he had some rapid onset version of Parkinson's or something," says Jamie, who toured intermittently with her husband. "After an adjustment, the change," she says, "was like night and day." On Father's Day, his biological father, Kent Klein, called to say he had prostate cancer. And soon Weiland learned that his mother Sharon, with whom he was very close, also had cancer. This was especially devastating, since he already had lost his only brother. He was sad about his mom, said guitarist Nick Mayberry, who replaced Brown in the Wildabouts. At a tour stop in San Diego, Weiland broke down crying on the street before soundcheck. "We were just holding him, like it's alright, brother." Making it all worse, Weiland was estranged from his own children, Noah 15 and Lucy 13, who lived with their mother, Weiland's second wife and former model Mary Forsberg. A court had granted her full custody of them. He talked about missing his kids in November, when the singer met up with his mother, his brother's widow, and his 2 nieces. Celebrity rehab drug counselor Bob Forrest, who also made an attempt to help Lane Staley, also saw him at the restaurant that day. "I was just like, are you okay? He didn't look so good. He looked gray." He remembers, he definitely shouldn't have been touring. But Weiland needed the income, which was another major source of anxiety. With a Grammy-winning catalog that spanned more than 2 decades, he had sold 16.2 million albums in the United States. But many trips to rehab, child support payments, the expenses of addiction, and 2 divorces had left the entertainer in dire financial straits. In October 2015, Weiland announced that Scott Weiland and the Wildabouts set off on tour, which would span from October 28th to December 19th. "This tour is about making a connection," Weiland said in a post on his Facebook page. "We'll perform the hits from Stone Temple Pilots to Velvet Revolver. I made Blaster for them, but it is fresh. We made an album that can resonate and attract a whole new group of fans. It's a rebirth." Fans, and Scott himself, had no idea that this tour would not be a rebirth, but a curtain call. Scott was pictured numerous times by fans in November of 2015, binge drinking with bassist Tommy Black. On December 1st, 2015, Weiland appeared in an interview with 102.1 The Edge. In the interview, Scott seems off, and looks much older than his 48 years.
Concert that you ever went to?
Beatlemania. I was about 12 years old. It was in Blossom Hill in Cleveland, Ohio. It had a big effect on me. The Beatles have always had a big effect on me.
And the most recent concert you saw, or a band that you kind of went out of your way to see?
My most recent concert was my own.
Also good?
It was rocking.
On Wednesday, December 2nd, in Chicago, the Wildabouts bus stopped after a show in Toronto. The next morning, according to a crew member on the bus, Weiland woke up at 9, used the bathroom, and then returned to bed. Sometime later, after they had arrived in Bloomington, Minnesota, Black knocked on the singer's door to invite him to breakfast, but Weiland didn't answer. This wasn't unusual. He slept late. That was one custom everyone observed. If Scott's asleep, we leave him. So when the band and crew headed out to the Mall of America to shop for Christmas presents, they left him behind, like always. In Los Angeles that day, Jamie woke up to a text that read, "I'm so in love with my beautiful wife." She called and texted Weiland's phone, but got no response. It wasn't like him to not get back to her, especially on a day off. "I just started getting this weird, agitated feeling," says Jamie. At 7 p.m. in Minnesota, she called Aaron Moeller, the band's tour manager, and a former Marine, who promised to wake the singer. Around 8 p.m., Moeller entered the tour bus, which was parked behind a Marriott Courtyard Inn. Weiland was lying on his left side in a fetal position. His hands were by his head, and his eyes were half closed. I shook his leg and thought, oh my god, he's not moving. I went to his shoulders and realized he was stiff. Moeller called drummer Joey Castillo, who sprinted there from the lobby. He looked for a pulse along Weiland's neck, but couldn't find one. Meanwhile, Moeller dialed 911.
535, Post 3 in Bloomington, 2221 Killebrew Drive, in the parking lot on a possible cardiac arrest.
Veteran and Suites, 2221 Killebrew Drive. Got a tour bus in the parking lot. They got a possible DOA, one-stop reading.
425. You call 206 on your cell phone, 1085.
Prime left for photos on that date, please.
4825, can you log Prime? Hennepin County Prime's lab on scene.
Jamie still hadn't heard anything, so she kept redialing Moeller's cell, which went straight to voicemail. Then a crew member called to break the terrible news. "Honey, he's dead. He's not coming back." "I just fell to the floor," Jamie remembers. Police arrived within minutes. "I was in tears," says Maybury. "It was like it's all over. Scott's gone. The band's finished. There's no more music, and we're going home. It was the worst." When Black learned what happened, he fled to the nearest bar, a TGI Fridays. "I had a bunch of shots," he admits. "He drank so much so quickly, he soon had to be carried out. I was just bewildered and really upset. I lost my best friend." Around 8:45 p.m., about 15 cops were on the scene. Meanwhile, a canine unit sniffed out a bag of cocaine in Weiland's room, and another under the mattress of Black's bunk. After finding the drugs, the police stripped the bus. They flipped every mattress, went through every article of clothing, and dumped every backpack. "It looked like a hurricane had hit after they went through it," says Moeller. The Bloomington Police Department took Black into custody, legally unable to take a statement from an inebriated witness. After 17 hours in a cinder-block jail cell, he was released. The police declined to file charges against Black, saying it was difficult to prove the narcotics belonged to him. Stone Temple Pilots guitarist Dean DeLeo hadn't spoke to Weiland in years, but was distraught to hear his former bandmate's death. "It was a feeling I had never experienced," he says. "My heart dropped. It felt like a part of me fell out." "I adored Scott," says his mother. "He struggled as an adult, as everybody knows, but he had a heart of gold." A funeral was held at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a place where Jamie and Scott used to watch movies frequently. STP's 3 surviving members were there, but Forsberg and Weiland's 2 children were not. "Sometimes I think he's gonna walk through the front door," Jamie says through tears, sitting inside the Laurel Canyon home they shared. "The pajamas that Weiland died in are still in the bag. I just can't bring myself to do anything with them," she confesses. "I didn't think it could physically hurt to miss someone, but it does. I miss him. We all do." Scott's son Noah followed in his father's footsteps and became a musician. And just like his father, Noah revealed his struggle with drugs after being fired from his band Suspect 208. Noah is now cleaning up and has gotten sober. Despite comments Scott made to the media towards the end of his life, Noah said his father hadn't been close to him or his sister. "I remember my mom would get upset a lot because she'd see him in interviews saying that we'd always be spending time with him. The last year my dad was alive, I think we saw him once, and it was for maybe like an hour. The energy I could remember because I was 14. He just felt so off and so drained. All I can remember is seeing him in so much pain. Looking back, it felt like it was the last time I was going to see him." Weiland is remembered for his onstage charisma and unmatched presence. Scott's legacy will always be remembered through Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver's music.